All right, I'm down here in Lake Okoboji, Iowa, visiting the Higgins Museum. It's one of the greatest national currency museums there are in the United States. We're going to be going inside, taking a look around, and we've got a time to set up with a little conversation, very small, with the curator, George. I have to thank my brother-in-law who painfully accompanied me on this journey of 4.5 hours down from the Twin Cities. Let's take a look inside. Look at that, doing a little intro before the video starts. That's different. Hi, I'm Dan. Welcome to Polar Currency and video number 63, Day Trip to a Money Museum. For a while now, I have been aware of the Higgins Museum of National Banknotes located in Iowa, but I've just never been there. It's about a 3 or 4 hour drive away from where I live, but in a direction that I rarely go. Also, not having a currency buddy nearby. And believe me, I've punished my wife once with a money show in the last 2 years. I don't want to push it. I really didn't want to go alone. Then I was talking to my brother-in-law about it at his cabin this past 4th of July, where I did the intro to What's Up is Down video. He's more than a relative, and I'm lucky to call him a brother and a friend. And he actually watches Polar Currency, so I don't know what's wrong with him. Well, he volunteered to go, so we scheduled a trip in August and headed south. I mean, how many times do you get to go to a money museum? So we packed up the car and headed southwest and found our way to Okoboji, Iowa. The museum has the largest collection of national banknotes on exhibit in the nation and has the most complete collection of 1902 red seal notes in existence. Have to admit, they were really impressive. Just so awesome to see so many red seal nationals together. Most of the notes are from Iowa and the surrounding states. The museum and collection were both founded by William R. Higgins, Jr., who was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota in 1913 and raised in nearby Spencer, Iowa. What's weird about that is that's where my maternal grandmother's from. Once you get through the main entrance, and by the way, it's free to visit the museum, it's basically set up in 5 areas. A large center area with 4 gallery rooms that radiate out. The building is actually star-shaped when you see it from above, like you did when we flew in. But we were immediately greeted by George, who was very gracious with his time, patience, and fielding my stupid questions. What a great resource for a curator.
Hi, welcome to the Higgins Museum in Okoboji, Iowa. The museum features the collection of Bill Higgins, who was mayor of Okoboji from 1960 to 1974. The museum opened in 1979 and is 9,000 square feet of just national banknotes. So come and enjoy.
And I'm just coming in because I'm giving George a lot of crap, and as you can all understand, he's kind of in a little pain right now because of me. But I really appreciate that he let us do this today. Thanks, George.
And we appreciate you visiting.
All right.
Thanks.
A little background on Higgins. He graduated from Drake University Law School in 1936 and was admitted to the Iowa Bar. Cool sidebar here. While attending Drake, Higgins met this young radio announcer at WHO Radio, some guy named Ronald Reagan. I guess they'd be friends for like 60 more years. He also served our country in China during World War II and then came back and settled down in the Okoboji area. First off, we went to Iowa, which had 2 wings because, it's Iowa. Higgins started collecting nationals in 1972, and get this, he was able to collect 278 out of 301 banks in Iowa that issued notes. That's 92%. Think how difficult that would be to do back in the day. Must have been a ton of windshield time in the car. Just think what he could have done with today's internet. Higgins' initial numismatic
3 more consonants, 1 more vowel.
focus was coins. He had a collection of over 7,000 crown coins from all around the world. I don't really know what those are and pretty much don't care because they're coins. But what's interesting? He switched to paper currency, an early convert. He sold all of his coins in 1973 and 74 that realized $1.2 million. Unmarried and without children, he formed the William R. Higgins Jr. Foundation and gave his banknote collection to the people of Okoboji, Iowa. with the museum being built from the proceeds from the sale of the coins. Next up was the South Dakota and Nebraska wing, but time was burning, and I was just itching to get to the Minnesota Gallery. It was really cool to see all the nationals from my home state. All of these tiny, small towns that had national banks and issued currency. That had to have created some community pride. Minnesota's room was displayed alphabetically, and here's several highlights of the towns and bank names that were personal to me and some that may have a bit of national notoriety. First up is the $5 brownback from Austin, where both my parents grew up and both my grandfathers worked for Hormel, the inventor of Spam. There's the 1902 20 from Black Duck, which is where I go grouse hunting every year. Seriously, it's just a tiny town an hour south of the Canadian border, and it was issuing paper money. South to the Blooming Prairie First National Bank and the $10 note that's dated 1903. Blooming Prairie makes me laugh because the local high school doesn't really have the strongest mascot name in Minnesota, but they embrace it. Go Blossoms! Then north to Duluth and a $10 red seal from the City National Bank. The Port of Duluth on Lake Superior is the world's farthest inland port accessible to ocean-going ships in the world from the Atlantic Ocean using the St. Lawrence Seaway. Just northeast of Duluth is the Blue Seal Miners National Bank of Eveleth, a town that resides on the Mesabi Iron Range in northern Minnesota and is also home to the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame. The next note was personal for my brother-in-law, the 1902 $10 National from Hancock. This is where he and my wife's mom were raised, my mother-in-law, Helen. Hancock is a dot on the northern prairie, and he was shocked that the bank issued money. And I found out that the building still exists. He remembered the building from walking around downtown as a kid. Way back up north to the Canadian border to International Falls, which is also the fictional home of Frostbite Falls if you're a fan of the Rocky and Bullwinkle cartoons.
Is moose and squirrel!
Heading back down south to the Le Sueur Center National Bank. Le Sueur is the original home to the Jolly Green Giant. Then up to the Little Falls First National Bank along the Mississippi River in central Minnesota. Little Falls is home to Charles Lindbergh, who made the first solo nonstop flight from New York City to Paris in 1927. We turn back south to the National Bank of Northfield, which is about an hour drive from my home. This is quite the $1 original national ace. No charter numbers and it's serial number 1. This was the last bank that was robbed by the Jesse James gang in 1876. Stay tuned for an upcoming video on that. Then we head east to the Goodhue County Bank of Red Wing, Minnesota on the Mississippi River with that Red Seal 10. Red Wing is home to Red Wing shoes and the world's largest boot that stands over 20 feet tall, and it would be a size 638 and a half, not a quarter, a half. I'm assuming that's a men's size? We head southeast just a bit to the Rochester National Bank and this Brownback 10. Rochester only has about 120,000 residents, but it's home to the Mayo Clinic and actually has an international airport for all the patients seeking health care at the world-famous hospital. Back over to central Minnesota to the Merchants National Bank of Sauk Center and a 1902 Blue Seal. Sauk Center is home to Sinclair Lewis, the first American writer to receive the Nobel Prize in Literature Award in 1930. Heading south almost back to Iowa is the National Bank of Windham. This is where I went to film a segment of my third video, Serious Mutton Chops, about the 1891 $2 silver certificate with William Windham on it. The town was named after the former 3-time Secretary of the Treasury. Finishing up the alphabet, we kind of saved the best for last by coincidence. We head back east to the Mississippi River and the First National Bank of Winona. This is an uncut sheet of two $5 notes, the original series, no charter numbers, dated October 24, 1864. Now, a great numismatic artist connection here. James Earl Frazier, the American sculptor and medallic artist best known for his design of the Buffalo nickel, not to mention all of his iconic artwork that graces numerous locations throughout the U.S., he was born and raised in Winona. Well, thanks for your patience, and those are the highlights from around the state that I love via national banknotes. Seeing all these beautiful national notes made me realize that I have very few large-sized nationals. I have a grand total of 4. I have the Series 1902 5 from the Metropolitan National Bank of Minneapolis. Nationals are just kind of a mixed budget bag for me. Here's the 1902 10 from the Twin Cities National Bank of St. Paul. I really collect them as a large size type note as opposed to just nationals. The 1902 20 American National Bank of St. Paul is the nicest of the four notes. Large size nationals bend my budget, and getting a first or second charter from Minnesota will break it. You see, according to the 1860 federal census, Minnesota just had over 100,000 people compared to, say, Ohio with 2.3 million people. Minnesota as a state back in the 1860s and beyond just didn't issue that many large-sized nationals. It's pretty much a scarcity rarity thing. The good news is I got a recent pickup, a really ugly $5 note from the National Bank of Fairhaven, Vermont. It's my first original, and it's exactly what I look for. It's got some story. It's an 1864 without charter numbers. Yeah, there's tape repairs and overall condition, but I'm good with it. I'm surprised the note still got a very good 8, but for me it was affordable. The back is much better. The green still has life, and you can plainly see Columbus in the vignette being all Mr. Big Man on an island in the Bahamas when he thought he was in India. There's a lot more to see, including some very impressive territorial nationals, along with the exhibits in the center gallery with a nice collection of Missouri notes, along with a spider press and a currency cutting machine that could be purchased by banks from the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. Well worth the trip, and if you're ever in northwestern Iowa, it's definitely worth a stop. And it's all thanks to William R. Higgins Jr., who passed away in 1991 and certainly left a very impressive legacy behind. You know, I did get a bonus at the museum. I purchased Don Kelly's National Note 6th edition with a hardcover for only $50. A hardcover. Now that's a good price. Well, that's it for number 63, Day Trip to a Money Museum. I want to really, again, thank my brother-in-law for tolerating me. I'm sure it wasn't the most exciting thing he had going for him on that day. Thank you, brother. I was glad to have you along. As always, I appreciate all your time, and if you like what you see, please hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and feel free to leave a comment. We'll see you in a few weeks, and thanks for checking in.